The night shift at Blackwood Labs. Blackwood Laboratories was a state-of-the-art facility nestled deep in the woods, far from prying eyes. Officially, it was a research center for infectious diseases, working on vaccines and treatments for the world's deadliest pathogens. Unofficially, rumors swirled about unethical experiments, classified projects, and things that went bump in the night. I was hired as a night shift security guard, tasked with patrolling the facility from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. The pay was good, and the job seemed easy enough. Just walk the halls, check the cameras, and make sure nothing was out of place. But on my first night, I realized there was more to Blackwood Labs than met the eye. Night 1, the whispering halls. The facility was eerily quiet at night, the hum of fluorescent lights the only sound. My supervisor, a grizzled man named Carl, gave me a quick tour before handing me the keys and a radio. "Stick to the patrol route," he said, his tone serious. "Don't go into the restricted areas, no matter what. And if you hear anything unusual, call it in immediately." I nodded, brushing off his ominous tone. How bad could it be? It was just a lab. But as I made my rounds, I began to notice strange things. The air felt heavier in certain hallways, like the walls were pressing in on me. The cameras flickered occasionally, their feeds glitching for a split second. And then there were the whispers, faint, almost imperceptible, like someone was speaking just out of earshot. I told myself it was just my imagination, the result of being alone in a creepy building at night. But deep down, I knew something was off. Night 3, the restricted wing. By the third night, the whispers had grown louder, more insistent. They seemed to come from the restricted wing, a section of the lab that was off limits to everyone except high-level researchers. The doors were always locked, and the keycard reader glowed with a faint red light. I tried to ignore it, sticking to my patrol route as Carl had instructed. But as I passed the restricted wing, I heard something that made my blood run cold. A voice, clear and distinct, calling my name. "Jason, come closer." I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. The voice was soft, almost soothing, but there was something wrong with it, something unnatural. "Jason, let me out," I radioed Carl, my hands shaking. "I think there's someone in the restricted wing. I heard a voice." There was a long pause before Carl responded, his voice tense. "Stay where you are. I'm on my way." "You shouldn't have gone near the restricted wing," Carl muttered as we walked, his voice low and gravelly. "That area's off limits for a reason." "I didn't go in," I protested, my voice shaky. "I just heard something. A voice. It sounded like it was calling my name." Carl stopped in his tracks, turning to face me. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of fear. "What did it say?" "It said, 'Jason, come closer. Let me out.'" I hesitated, then added, "It sounded human, but not quite." Carl exhaled sharply, running a hand over his face. "Damn it. I was hoping you wouldn't hear it this soon." "Hear what?" I demanded, my frustration bubbling over. "What's in there, Carl? What aren't you telling me?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he led me to the security office, a small room filled with monitors displaying feeds from every corner of the facility. He sat down heavily in the chair and pulled up the camera feed for the restricted wing. The screens showed a series of sterile, empty rooms, their walls lined with containment units and biohazard symbols. But in one of the rooms, something moved, a shadowy figure, barely visible, pacing back and forth. I leaned closer, my heart pounding. "What is that?" Carl hesitated, then said, "We call it Subject 17. It's not human. Not anymore, at least. It was brought here years ago after an outbreak in a remote village. The people there started hearing voices, seeing things that weren't there. Then they changed, became something else. This is the only one we managed to contain. I stared at the screen, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. The figure was vaguely humanoid, but its movements were wrong, jerky and unnatural, like a marionette being pulled by invisible strings. Its face, though blurred by the camera's resolution, seemed to shift and distort, as if it couldn't decide what it wanted to look like. "Why wasn't I told about this?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Because no one would take the job if they knew," Carl said bluntly. "But you need to understand, this thing is dangerous. It can mimic voices, manipulate your perception. It gets inside your head, makes you see and hear things that aren't there. And if it gets out..." He trailed off, his expression darkening. "If it gets out, what?" I pressed. Carl didn't answer. Instead, he turned back to the monitors, his jaw clenched. "Just stick to the patrol route. Don't go near the restricted wing. And if you hear anything unusual, call me immediately. Don't engage. Don't investigate. Just call." I nodded, though my mind was racing. The figure on the screen had stopped pacing and was now standing perfectly still, its head tilted at an unnatural angle. It almost looked like it was staring directly into the camera, directly at me. Night 4. The voices grow louder. The next night, the whispers returned. They were louder now, more insistent, and they seemed to follow me wherever I went. I tried to ignore them, focusing on my patrols and the monotonous routine of checking doors and cameras. But it was getting harder. As I passed the restricted wing, the whispers grew into a cacophony of voices, all speaking at once. Some were pleading, others angry, and a few laughing. I pressed my hands to my ears, trying to block them out, but it was no use. The voices were inside my head, echoing in the darkest corners of my mind. "Jason, let us out. You don't belong here. We can show you the truth," I radioed Carl, my hands shaking. "It's happening again. The voices, they're everywhere." There was a long pause before Carl responded, his voice tense. "Stay where you are. I'm on my way." But as I waited, something caught my eye. A flicker of movement on one of the security monitors. I turned to look, my blood running cold. The figure in the restricted wing was no longer in its containment unit. The room was empty. "Carl," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "It's gone." He didn't say a word as he pulled up the camera feeds, his hands moving quickly over the controls. The screens showed nothing but empty hallways and rooms, but the feeling of dread in the air was palpable. "We need to find it," Carl said, his voice low, "before it finds you." "Finds me?" I asked, my voice rising in panic. "What do you mean?" Carl didn't answer. Instead, he handed me a flashlight and a taser. "Stay close, and whatever you do, don't listen to the voices." We moved through the facility slowly, our footsteps echoing in the empty halls. The whispers followed us, growing louder with every step. They seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, a chorus of voices that twisted and distorted until I couldn't tell if they were real or just in my head. As we approached the restricted wing, the air grew colder, the shadows deeper. Carl stopped suddenly, holding up a hand to silence me. He pointed to a door at the end of the hallway, the door to Subject 17's containment unit. It was slightly ajar. "It's in there," Carl whispered. "Stay behind me." We crept toward the door, our flashlights cutting through the darkness. The whispers were deafening now, a cacophony of voices that seemed to scream in my ears. I clenched my teeth, trying to block them out, but it was no use. Carl pushed the door open slowly, his flashlight sweeping the room. The containment unit was empty, its glass shattered from the inside. But as we stepped inside, something moved in the corner, a shadowy figure, hunched and twisted, its face a grotesque mask of human features. It smiled at us, and that's when I felt it, a sharp pain in my chest, like something was burrowing into me. I stumbled back, gasping for air, as the whispers filled my mind, drowning out everything else. I don't know how I made it back to the security office. By the time Carl found me, I was curled up in a corner, my hands pressed to my ears, trying to block out the voices. He knew what had happened. He didn't say a word as he helped me to my feet and led me to the decontamination chamber. But as the doors sealed shut, I saw the look in his eyes, pity, and something else, fear. The decontamination process was excruciating, a series of chemicals and radiation designed to kill anything that might have infected me. But as I sat there, trembling and alone, I realized it was too late. The thing was inside me now, its whispers a constant presence in my mind. I could feel it spreading, taking over, changing me. I don't know how much time I have left. The doctors say they're working on a cure, but I can see the doubt in their eyes. They know as well as I do that there's no cure for this. So I sit here, writing this, hoping that someone will find it and understand what happened. The night shift at Blackwood Labs isn't just a job, it's a death sentence. And the whispers, they never stop. Epilogue. The new guard. A week later, a new security guard was hired for the night shift at Blackwood Labs. He was young, eager, and completely unaware of what awaited him. As he made his first patrol, he heard a faint whisper, almost imperceptible, coming from the restricted wing. "Come closer," it said, soft and soothing. And the cycle began again.